On the face of it, dystopian movies are the hardest sell in cinema. Who wants to see a film telling you that not everything goes wrong and we all live miserably ever after? But increasingly, it seems, that is what we want to see. Looking at recent hit sagas such as The Hunger Games, Planet of the Apes, Divergent and now a Blade Runner sequel. The pill has to be sugared with spectacle and romance, but dystopian futures perform a function. They are the canary in humanity's coal mine. They show us where we are going off course and what we are afraid of, not in the future, but in the present. In the same way we are doomed to repeat history. If we don't understand it, perhaps we are doomed to end up eating each other if we don't make Soylent Green. Few people wanted to hear what the original Blade Runner had to say in 1982. The economy was beginning to come out of recession and Ronald Reagan was preparing to announce it was morning in America, but Blade Runner gave us a world where everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Environmental degradation, pollution, urban sprawl, corporate dominance, technology run amok. It's the sum of all dystopias. No wonder audiences preferred the upbeat embrace of Spielberg's Eastern Time. Blade Runner 2049 review, a gigantic spectacle of pure hallucinatory craziness. Ryan Gosling plays an LAPD officer heading for an encounter with Harrison Ford's Deckard in a film whose sheer scale leaves you hyperventilating. Read more. But where most sci-fi movies quickly date, Blade Runner has improved with age. Of course, it was always a fantastic ride, superbly detailed and steeped in neo-noir atmospherics, but its deep, troubling ideas about technology, humanity, and identity chimed with postmodern and cyberpunk theory and launched 1,000 PhD theses. One of the few student lectures I can remember was about the French theorist Jean Baudrillard, Orders of Simulacra, and how nothing is really real anymore. In a down-with-the-kids gesture, the lecturer stood behind a TV monitor playing a muted video of Blade Runner. "You'll probably get more out of watching this than you will by listening to me," she said. She was right. Deciphering Baudrillard's arcane prose is like wading through treacle. Blade Runner is a ride you don't want to get off. And, against all odds, its belated follow-up, Blade Runner 2049, carries the baton brilliantly, both in terms of visual spectacle and finishing the debates the first movie began. Between the two movies and Philip K. Dick's source novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?, Blade Runner serves as a record of how our dystopian fears have evolved over the past half-century. When Dick wrote this story, in 1968, he was thinking of the dehumanizing process of Nazism. His replicants, artificially engineered humans with a 4-year lifespan, were essentially less than human entities, Dick stated. They were deplorable because they are heartless, they are completely self-centered, they don't care about what happens to other creatures. Ridley Scott's film turned it around, somewhat. Far from being a deplorable heartless machine, Rutger Hauer's chief replicant, supposedly the baddie, develops empathy for the cop trying to kill him. Replicants were the superior beings. More human than human, as their manufacturer, Eldon Tyrell, puts it. Apart from the 4-year lifespan, what was the difference? This was the part Baudrillard and co. were so keen to engage with. What was real when the copy was better than the original? The real is not only what can be reproduced, but that which is always already reproduced. The hyperreal, wrote Baudrillard. Human status was no longer a matter of biological or genetic fact. You couldn't trust your memories either, they could just be implants. So how do any of us know we are human? These are realms where Hollywood sci-fi does not often venture, although HBO's Westworld did a fine job of it on TV last year. They are far down the road from movies about dangerous technology, or artificial intelligence or malevolent cyborgs, or even space travel. We are talking beyond the final frontier. But Blade Runner also added some very 1980s fears into the mix. Corporate power, for example, which had taken over from democratic government entirely. The threat of foreign economic powers overtaking the U.S. also fed into Blade Runner's melting pot. Multilingual Los Angeles, particularly Japan, which was then buying up chunks of the US, including Hollywood studios. A few years later, Scott would make the Japan-phobic thriller Black Rain. Fear of nuclear annihilation was also high in the 1980s, but if it hasn't happened already in Blade Runner, it might as well have done. Anyone who could leave this barren planet has already done so. If we could go with them, we would be in a wondrous, intergalactic space adventure such as Star Trek or Guardians of the Galaxy. Instead, we are stuck down here with the dregs of humanity. 35 years on, many of those 1980s anxieties are ships that have sailed. Corporate influence has crept so far into politics that we accept it as the status quo. Foreign financial powers have encroached to the extent that Blade Runner 2049 is brought to you by Sony, as the product placement constantly reminds you. Nuclear annihilation? The Cold War thawed out soon after, though the North Korea situation is threatening to bring it back. We have got a new set of fears to feed into the dystopian machine now, and Blade Runner 2049 seems to have processed them. For a start, there is the fear of social relations in the digital age. Building on the first movie's city planning, Los Angeles has become an even vaster metropolis here, a neon-lit, high-rise favela, crammed with people, but starved of social interaction. The flying cars and giant holograms might be futuristic, but the vision of lonely, atomized urban life is familiar.